board in a minute. I've got a lecture, etc., from my Kindle version because I walked off and left all my books at home this morning. I'm going to give you an extra credit opportunity, but it's only going to work, okay, if you haven't thrown away your first exam. So hopefully you haven't thrown away your first exam, your essay. Here's your opportunity, and it's worth a maximum of 15 points. Doesn't mean you'll automatically get the full 15 points, okay? It's from 0 to 15 points. Revise that paper, all right, and turn it into me a week from today, okay? But when you revise the paper and turn in the revised version, you have to submit the marked up version as well, the graded exam. You don't turn in the graded exam, you get 0. I won't even look at it because I need that graded exam to compare it with the revised version to see how much you have revised, okay, or to see how much you have corrected errors. And I'll tell you right now, all the errors had better be corrected. If there are things like spelling errors, grammatical errors, that kind of stuff, that had better all be fixed, okay, if you want to get points on it. So, revise the exam, submit the revised version and the original marked up version a week from today for up to a possible 15 points. That possible 15 points, for example, that'll raise, if you got an F, your F to a C minus. Okay? If you got a B, it'll raise you to an A. 100, in other words. That's due a week from today, beginning of class. Okay, so we start today, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I'm going to try and last the whole hour and a half, but I'm not sure if I'm going to make it because I'm on a new antibiotic and it's tearing up my stomach. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Harry Potter in the American edition, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. When J.K. Rowling began writing these was right around the time that the first year of school begins for Harry, 1991. Okay. At the time she began writing them, she was poor. She was on the Scottish version of welfare. Okay. She was an unwed mother. Now, she had been wed. She got her degree, University of Exeter. I want to say it was a double major in classics and modern languages. I know French was one of her kind of areas, but I was almost positive she had Latin and Greek also. When she graduated from college, she went off to Portugal and worked for Amnesty International in Portugal. She married a hot young Portuguese reporter. Whirlwind relationship. That is, she met him. They were married within 2 months. She got pregnant, and then they were divorced within 6 months. Okay. Went back to the UK. Went to Scotland, to Edinburgh. And on a trip from a train ride from Manchester to London, I don't remember what she was doing either in Manchester or what she was going to be doing in London. But she was on a train from Manchester to London. And at the beginning of the trip, she had no idea about Harry Potter. She had no plans for a novel about this kid. But literally, like she went through a pocket of air, and this pocket of air stuck to her like glue to paper. And this pocket of air had in it this fully formed idea. That is, at one moment, she was just an unwed poor mother. And another moment, she was still an unwed poor mother. But she had now the idea of a young boy who discovers on his 11th birthday that he's a wizard. that his parents were murdered by the greatest dark wizard who ever lived, and that the dark wizard was after him. And his name was Harry Potter. Okay? And so she starts scribbling. She gets back up to Scotland, and she starts writing this boy's story, writing it in longhand on yellow legal pads. She'd go to a couple of different cafes, and she'd rock her daughter in her daughter's pram, rocking it with her foot while she wrote out longhand this story. While she wrote the one story that became Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, she also worked on notes for subsequent stories because she knew from the outset this thing would be told in 7 novels. In other words, somehow she knew, I've got a lot more here than just one book. Okay? She finally gets it finished, and she sends it off to a publisher. And she gets a rejection letter. She sends it off to another publisher, another acquisitions editor. She gets another rejection letter. She does this a total of 21 times. And is rejected 21 times. Okay. Imagine for a moment you are one of those 21 acquisitions editors who rejected Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Okay. She sends it off to Bloomsbury, and the acquisitions editor kind of rolls the dice on it. Says, yes, we'll publish it. They publish a very small initial print run, and it sells. They have no advertising for it. None. It sells by word of mouth. Some parent picks it up in a bookstore, thinks of it for their kid, for their son, largely, because they don't know the author one is a woman. She was advised to use the initials J.K. Rowling. K is not part of her name. Her birth name is just Joanne Rowling. The publisher suggests putting a K in there as a middle initial. Why? Because it kind of sounds like J.R.R., like Tolkien. Okay? So she puts it in there. It doesn't stand for K-A-Y or K-A-Y-E. Okay? So some parents see the book. They kind of look at the back dust jacket where it gives kind of a brief précis of what the story's about. They buy it, give it to their son. Son eats it up, gives it to his friend. His friend's parents then buy it for him. He gives it back to the original owner. He loans it to somebody else. This is how it initially starts to sell. Okay? They print more copies after a while. Meanwhile, she's at work on book 2. Book 1 is published in 1997 in hardback. Okay? Book 2 is published in 1998. There is still very little advertising. Book 3 is published in 1999. Now it's starting to get press. I first heard about it in, I think it was January of 1999. I was driving to work one morning, which was before the 3rd book came out. I was driving to work one morning. This was back when I still listened to NPR. And NPR had on that morning a guy named T.R. Reid. He's now in their Japan or Tokyo desk, I believe. And he was talking about this new series of books. And he compared it with C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. But he compared it favorably to Narnia, talking about Narnia negatively. Okay? He said, it's not this old, boring, staid, religious allegory like C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. And he mentioned Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Well, when he said the negative stuff about Lewis, I kind of turned off because I was real big into Lewis. At the time, still am. I teach a course on Lewis and stuff. So I had the name planted in my mind. I hadn't read anything about it. And later on that spring, February or March, I think it was, I was at Sam's Club and I saw Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the American edition, and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And I said, that's that book what's his name was talking about. So I picked it up, turned over the back, read the stuff on the back, and opened to the first page and read, Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They are the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. And the first thing that struck me was the thorough Britishness of that opening paragraph. You know, the thank you very much kind of a comment. And so I stood there and read on, and I read the first chapter just standing there. Okay? And once I got to the part about Dumbledore, I was hooked. I thought, okay, there's something going on here. More than just witches and wizards. Okay? There's something else to this book. I didn't know what at that point. So I bought it. I read it in like 2 days, went back to the store, got the next one. Okay? Third book came out that year, got it. About a year or two later, I started bringing them into the classes that I was teaching. That is, I was teaching a fantasy lit course at the time, which died for about 10 years. But I was teaching fantasy lit, and I started including the Harry Potter series, among the readings. Okay? So she publishes the third book in 98, the fourth book in 2000, and then there's a break. Okay? By the time the fourth book comes out, advertising is huge. It's when the fourth book comes out, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, that we see for the first time midnight release parties. Bookstores staying open until midnight of the day that the book is published, and then having parties for that. It's with the the fourth book published, that we see the first advance orders on places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Okay? Where you can order the book and actually purchase the book without actually having it in your hands. Okay? People ordered Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire months in advance, and it was delivered, I used to remember the exact date. It was July something, summer of 2000. Okay? Fifth book doesn't come out for 3 more years. It's released in July of 2003. Okay? Sixth book then comes out 2 years after that, July of 2005, and the seventh book comes out 2 years after that, July of 2007. I know it's July of 03, 05, and 07 because I'd started teaching my Harry Potter course in London in 2003. Okay? Because I knew the book is coming out, so we had 4 books that we already had. Students were eager to register for this course because they knew they'd be able to get the 5th book in London, and they'd be able to be in London for the 5th book release party at the largest bookstore in London. Okay? Plus, the films were already coming out. Okay? And in 2005, which film was it that was released? I think it was number 3, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And so they could try to go to, the big film release, things like that. And they were looking forward to trying to see, various actors from the films and such. So with number 5, when it was released, this was true for number 4 as well, but number 5 really broke all the records. It was the fastest selling book on record. It sold more copies on its release than any other book ever. Okay, there were something like 8 million advance copies sold. That is, before you could even see the book, 8 million copies had been sold. Okay? And then within 24 hours, I don't remember what the number is, but it's over 1 million copies were sold in bookstores. I mean, it's just huge, just amazing. When number 6 came out, it beat number 5. When number 7 came out, it beat number 6. Right? When number 4 came out, back in 2000, summer of 2000, it created a problem for a certain company. Because when number 4 came out, the top 4 books on the New York Times bestseller list were Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Top 4 books. Okay? Well, the New York Times Review of Books didn't like that. Because the New York Times Review of Books looks at itself as being all about serious fiction, adult literature, serious books for serious people. So, before the 5th book came out, they created a new list. The New York Times bestseller children's literature. Why? So they didn't have to put the damn Harry Potter books on the list with all this other serious literature. So when books 5, 6, and 7 came out, they weren't listed on the New York Times bestseller list general, as it were. They were listed under the children's literature. Okay? Which is kind of odd because by the time you get especially to books 6 and 7, it's not children's literature anymore. Okay, yeah. Harry is 16 and 17 in those books. He is still technically, let's say, a child. But the books aren't children's lit. 6 and 7 are nothing like. In fact, 5, 6, and 7 are nothing like 1. Beginning with book 4, you see a huge turn. Thematically, subject matter, okay, approach, tone, all changes with book 4. Book 4 is kind of the hinge for the series. You know, the hinge works. It's got 2 flaps, and it's got what's called the linchpin between the 2 parts of the hinge. Okay, that enables the hinge to open and close. Books 1 through 3 are 1 flap. Books 5 through 6 are another flap. And book 4 is the linchpin. So like the first 3 books point to book 4, and the last 3 books flow from book 4. If you didn't have book 4, last 3 books would make no sense whatsoever. Okay? You can't just pick up book 5. You can't go from book 3 to book 5. You can go from book 1 to book 3. You don't have to read 1, 2, and 3 necessarily in order. You need to read book 1 first to get introduced to the world. But you can then easily pick up book 3. You're going to hear some stuff about the previous year, okay? But you're not necessarily going to miss a whole bunch of deeply important information. You skip book 4, you'll be completely lost with 5, 6, and 7. There's so much revealed in book 4. Okay, so 1997 to 2007 takes her 10 years to get all 7 books published. In 1997, when she submits that, 1996, when she submits that draft to a publisher, bear in mind again, she's poor. Now, she has gotten a little help from what's called the Scottish Humanities Council. They gave her, I think it was £1,500 or £3,000, like an arts grant. They saw promise in this, okay? But she's still essentially poor. She's living on welfare. 10 years later, she is the richest woman in the United Kingdom. Wealthier than Queen Elizabeth. She goes from essentially pennies to billions. One of the richest people in the world, one of the richest women in the world in 2007. She's like in Forbes' list of top 20 women billionaires. Okay? And it all happened how? Because she was taking a train trip from Manchester to London, and suddenly this idea pops into her mind. Where does that kind of literary inspiration come from? I mean, that's not something you're going to be tested over. I'm just throwing that kind of question out. Where Tolkien turned over an exam paper and wrote, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." He'd never seen the word hobbit before. Where does that spark come from? Okay? It's a really interesting question if you stop to think about it. Because it doesn't hit everybody. Why her and not one of you? Why her and not me? That's why I use this language all the time. It's like she's traveling in space on this train, and at one moment in time, there's a pocket of air that sticks to her, or that her brain goes through, and this pocket of air has all these ideas in it, and it connects. Harry Potter, 11-year-old boy, discovers on his birthday he's a wizard. His parents are murdered by the greatest dark wizard who's ever lived. And he's after him. Huh. And so she starts writing it. I mean, it's just an interesting problem, let's say. Okay. Chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. So we've been introduced to the Dursleys. Oh, let me back up for a minute. The title of the book. The American edition is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The British edition, in fact, everywhere else in the world, New Zealand, Australia, okay, Germany, Russia, that is even in foreign languages, it's Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So why change it to Sorcerer's Stone? Because her American editor and publisher, initial publisher, a guy named Arthur A. Levine, said, Americans will never buy a book for their children that has the word philosophy or philosopher in the title. Why? Because we're too stupid. We don't like philosophy. But it's not Harry Potter and the Philosophy Stone. It's not about philosophy at all. And he recommends the change to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Okay? But what does that title suggest? Magic. But what kind of magic? What does sorcerer and sorcery usually imply? Dark or bad or evil magic. Okay? Pardon?
Wizards are good and sorcerers are bad.
Exactly. Wizards are good, sorcerers are bad. Okay? Sauron in The Lord of the Rings is sometimes referred to as a sorcerer. Gandalf, never. Always a wizard. Okay? Saruman and his actions are sometimes referred to as sorcery. Okay? Never wizardry. Okay? So, what's one of the things that happens because of that American title?
Christians don't let their kids read.
Okay? Not all Christians. I'm a Christian, starting a church here in town. I encourage young people to read these books. I argue against Christians who won't read the books. I once had a graduate student. Her husband was a minister. And she's like, well, Dr. Sherman, I just can't believe you encourage your children to read that book, or other children. And I said, don't burn it until you read it. I mean, we had a couple long, drawn-out conversations about what are the books, all of them together, about. Because a lot of Christians, I'll use my terminology, right-wing wacko nut jobs, okay, wanted to burn the books or tried to ban them from schools. Not to keep their own children from reading them, but to keep other people's children from reading them. Why? Well, partly the title. These books are full of sorcery. And God outlaws sorcery. You go back to the Old Testament. You look at the Levitical law. What does it say? Kill sorcerers and witches and wizards. It doesn't say debate them. It says take them out, stone them. Doesn't mean get them stoned. It means kill them. Okay? So, because the book has the title Sorcerer in it, they assumed this is about black magic. These books are designed to introduce children to the occult. She's trying to get them to love Satan, is what a lot of people said. Okay? So that by the time the fourth book came out, not only did we have release parties, we had book banning parties, book burning parties, largely in the South, more so than in California or in the Northeast and stuff. You know, pretty much in the Northeast and California, it doesn't matter what you read, just as long as you read. It could be Penthouse. Forget the pictures. There's words. Let the little boys and girls read. Yes.
The book burning parties, wouldn't it still profit J.K. Rowling because they had to buy the books?
Yeah, if they bought the books. Okay.
That was.
So, in, I think it was spring of around 2001, after book 4 came out, a reporter for the Vancouver Sun did an interview with J.K. Rowling. And the reporter asked her about Christianity. Because obviously, I mean, she knew what was going on in the United States with the people wanting to ban the books and censor the books and burn the books. And her, I mean, they were essentially saying she was going to rot in hell for leading children astray and such. I mean, she had spells in her books. You know, Wingardium Leviosa, things like that, and Expecto Patronum, which, by the way, if you know what the spells are in the book, they're all in what language? They're all Latin or bad Latin. Okay? And no matter what kind of piece of wood you get and stick whatever you want in it, you do this and say Wingardium Leviosa is never going to raise that Pringles can. Till you're blue in the face or dead. It ain't going to happen. Okay? So this reporter asked her, well, you know, Christians, blah, 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 blah. Are you a Christian? And she said, well, yes, I am. And the reporter was somewhat stunned. Well, you know, what kind? I mean, there's 22,000 Protestant denominations in the world. And then you have the Catholic Church, and then you have the Orthodox Church, and then there are a couple of kind of others. What stripe, what flavor of the month are you? Essentially, the reporter asked her. She says, I belong to the Church of Scotland, okay, which is like the granddaddy of the Presbyterian Church. Okay? He's like, okay. Well, how does your Christianity influence your writing? That is, what import, what impact does your Christianity have on the Harry Potter series? And she kind of demurred and said, Well, if I was to answer that, it would give away the ending. If I were to answer that, it would give away the ending. What does that answer necessarily mean? If she were to talk about how her Christianity influenced her writing, it would give away the end of the story, meaning the 7 books. So the 7 books are what?
Based off scripture.
Okay, is it that they're based off Scripture? Is Harry Jesus?
No.
No. It's not allegory. Okay? But it does mean Christianity has a huge influence. She is saying there's something to the Christian story that will be relevant to the end of the story. Okay? Something that the title Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone says nothing about. Why does it say nothing about it? Because there is no such thing as a sorcerer's stone. There never has been any such thing as a sorcerer's stone. But for over 2,000 years, people have looked for a philosopher's stone, or they have tried to create it. Including today, there are still alchemists trying to figure out how to make this thing. And you can go back to ancient China, 500 BC, where we know there were alchemists at work trying to do this. Why? What does the philosopher's stone do? Well, on a kind of base material level, it turns base metal into gold, and you can use it to create the elixir of life, or constellations if you want. Okay. Is that all they were after? To be able to turn lead into gold and create a drink that would make it so that you'd live forever. Okay. Literal level, yes. But you get beneath that, and the alchemists were after something else. Because what is happening here? The students study a particular subject in school. Okay? McGonagall is the teacher of it. They study transfiguration. Okay? Which is kind of interesting when you think about it, because that is a very biblical term. That's what happens to Christ on Mount Tabor when he goes up with Peter, James, and John, and he meets who? That is, Peter, James, and John see these 2 other guys, Moses and Elijah, and they talk about what? About the coming crucifixion. Okay? That happens on the, what later gets called the Mount of Transfiguration. Christ is transfigured. What happens there is he's revealed as he really is, the Son of God. Okay? So, another word for that, however, is transformation. Okay? So maybe the alchemists are looking for this. Okay? Think of what that means. Trans, across. Formation, being made. That is, being made across, being made into. Base metal, the lowest form of metal, into gold. What was thought during the Middle Ages and everything, the highest form of metal. Now platinum's worth more than gold. Okay? So what does that mean? Going from something very common and ordinary into something very high, very rare. Let's use another term. Purification. Okay? And then what about the elixir of life? constants of life. And taxes. You live old enough, you got to pay taxes. Okay? Death and taxes. But if you have the elixir of life, guess what? You don't have to die. Okay? Christ says in the Gospels, He came, why? So that people may have life, and He doesn't just stop there. It's not a choose life bumper sticker. And that you might have life abundantly. That is, overflowing, as it were. Like the elixir of life. Life that doesn't end. I mean, He says, I am the cup of water that gives eternal life. There it is. There's the elixir of life. Okay? That's tied into the Philosopher's Stone. It's not tied into the Sorcerer's Stone at all. So she embeds these ideas in the first book. And the damn crazy Christians who wouldn't read the first book never saw this. Because they're too busy trying to condemn her. Why? Because she wasn't like them. She didn't believe the same way, etc. Okay, now go back to the beginning. So we meet the Dursleys. And we're told the Dursleys, what? They were perfectly normal. Last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. So notice we get a description of normality here. Normality means you don't what?
Don't mess with magic, that's for sure.
Okay, you don't mess with magic, but magic isn't even mentioned in that first paragraph. Anything strange or mysterious, they don't want anything to do with. So how normal are they? They're the definition of normal for them. So if you're slightly, young Frankenstein illusion, abnormal, if you're slightly different, what do the Dursleys think of you? You're weird. You're an oddball. How do we know? What do we see within just a few pages? Vernon Dursley goes off to work, and what does he run into? First of all, before he even gets off his street, what does he see sitting on the stone fence outside their home?
Tabby cat.
Doing what?
Reading a map or looking at a sign.
Yeah, reading, and he kind of does a second take. What? Cats don't read signs? What else happens that day when he's at work? Owls are seen flying all over London or wherever the city is that he works. Okay. He sees weirdos. He goes off for a piece of Danish, and he sees people in long cloaks, and some of them come up to him and, wish him well. After all, you know who's gone, and he doesn't know who he's talking about. He overhears the name Potter. Okay. I want to pick up with around, it's going to be page 3 or 4. He sees people, as he's still in his car, sees a group of young people whispering excitedly together. Mr. Dursley was enraged to see that a couple of them weren't even young at all. Why, that man had to be older than he was, and wearing an emerald green cloak. The nerve of him. Well, what time of year is it? We don't know exactly yet, but we're going to be told. It's summer. You don't wear a cloak in London in summer, okay? But then it struck Mr. Dursley that this was probably some silly stunt, some kind of, scavenger hunt or something. So, he doesn't see the owls swooping around in broad daylight, but people down in the street did. Okay? what happens? He goes off to the baker's. He sees more people in cloaks. He overhears the name Potter and their young son, Harry. Mr. Dursley stops dead. That name means something to him. He goes back off to his office. He's like, Potters, Harry. Could be lots of people named Potter with son named Harry. He wasn't even sure that was his nephew's name. It might have been Harold. Well, Harry would be a natural diminutive form for Harold. So he goes back home, or on his way home. Let's see here. He bumps into someone. Says sorry. And the old man says, "Don't be sorry, my dear sir, for nothing could upset me today. Rejoice, for you know who is gone at last. Even muggles like yourself should be celebrating this happy, happy day." And he hugs Vernon. Vernon goes back home and he sees the cat still there. Goes inside and he finally works up this courage to ask his wife about her sister. After watching on the news about the owls, okay, and sure I don't misspeak here. Yeah, just in the owls. Sorry, this isn't summer. I misspoke here. Because the weatherman says it looks like viewers are getting ready for bonfire night. Okay, what is bonfire night? Anybody know? $11.5. Okay, this year, in which the first paragraph is 1981. 11.5, November 5th, is Guy Fawkes Day in England. Guy Fawkes was a leader of Catholic conspirators who attempted to blow up Parliament in 1600. I'm going to mess this up. 1605, I think. 1605 or 1606, something like that. Okay? Put a bunch of powder underneath Parliament, Houses of Parliament, not the same Houses of Parliament that you see in London today. Those are modern construction. And attempted to blow it up. Failed, was caught, executed. Okay, King James really clamped down on Catholics as a result of that. But the Brits celebrate, or have celebrated, Guy Fawkes Day ever since then. Because it was a plot that didn't succeed. So when he says people are celebrating Guy Fawkes Day, he's talking about the fireworks and stuff that people are shooting off. And mentions the shooting stars. So all this weird stuff is happening on this day. Okay? What day exactly is it? It's Halloween. Okay? Well, it was Halloween. This is actually November 1st. So, Vernon asks about Petunia's sister. Heard from her lately? No. About page 7. Funny stuff on the news. Owls, shooting stars, a lot of funny looking people in town. So, well, I just thought maybe it was, her crowd. And he asks about her nephew's name, their son. He'd be about Dudley's age now, wouldn't he? Suppose so. What's his name? Howard, isn't it? Why does he suggest Howard? He doesn't want it to be Harry. And she says, Harry, nasty common name, if you ask me. Harry. Okay? Also the name of the most loved British king in English history. Henry V, whose nickname was Harry. When he was in his teens, it was Hal. Okay? So, goes on to bed. And we're told, page 7 or 8, He couldn't see how he and Petunia could get mixed up in anything that might be going on. He yawned, turned over. It couldn't affect them. And the narrator says how very wrong he was. Why? Because what happens that very night? In fact, what happens in just a moment? An old man appears on the street. It doesn't say he walks around the corner and shows up on the street. It means he suddenly appears. And he pulls what looks like a cigarette lighter out of his pocket, and he starts flicking it. And as he does so, the lights on the street go out. He walks down to the Dursley home, and he sees the cat. And he says to the cat, "Fancy seeing you here, Professor McGonagall," and it's now no longer a cat, but a very stern-looking woman. And they talk. And what do they talk about? What everybody is celebrating that day. Page 9. Dumbledore says, you can't blame them. We've had precious little to celebrate for 11 years. Okay? Now this is 1981 when this is happening. So, 11 years previous, in 1970, that seems to be when Voldemort rises to power. Whatever that means. Right? So for 11 years, Voldemort has essentially been terrorizing the wizarding world. McGonagall, I know. But, I mean, we're losing our heads. Even the Muggles are seeing all this. Okay? And she says, he's really gone, Dumbledore? Dumbledore, seems so. He refers to he who must not be named. When McGonagall says, even if you know who is gone, Dumbledore says, all this you know who nonsense. For 11 years I've been trying to persuade people to call him by his proper name. Voldemort, or Voldemort, as Americans pronounce it. It gets also confusing if we keep saying you know who. And she says, you're different. You're the only one who ever feared. Dumbledore, you flatter me. Voldemort had powers I will never have. Only because you're too well noble to use them. In other words, she seems to be implying you could have those powers, but you're too noble, too good, too honorable. Okay? So, we've now been introduced to the name Voldemort. What does it mean? It's got three parts. Vol comes from Latin volare, which means to fly or flee. De means out of or from. Mort, death. To flee from death or to fly from death. Okay? This is somebody who's afraid to die, in other words. So, McGonagall says, the owls are flying, the owls are nothing next to the rumors about what everyone's saying, about why he's disappeared, about what finally happened. And she kind of stops because Dumbledore doesn't offer any information. What they're saying, she says, is that last night Voldemort turned up in Godric's Hollow. He went to find the Potters. The rumors that Lily and James are that they're dead. Dumbledore bows his head, like in prayer or in reverence. Lily and James, I can't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Oh, Albus. He says, I know, and pats her gently on the shoulder. And then she goes on and says, and that's not all they're saying. They're saying he tried to kill Harry, but he couldn't. And that's how his power broke. Dumbledore nods. It's true. After all he's done, all the people he's killed, notice we haven't been told who. He couldn't kill a little boy? How in the name of heaven did Harry survive? That's a strange phrase. How in the name of heaven? In the name of heaven, that part of the phrase, that's usually an oath. Okay? Dumbledore, we can only guess, we may never know. So, he goes on and explains why he's there. He's having young Harry delivered to be raised by his aunt and uncle, the Dursleys. And McGonagall just can't stand for this. These people are so unlike us, she says. Dumbledore, it's okay, I've explained it all in a letter. McGonagall, around page 13. A letter? You think you can explain all this in a letter? These people will never understand him. He'll be famous. A legend. I wouldn't be surprised if today was known as Harry Potter Day in the future. There will be books written about Harry. Kind of like the ones we're reading. Okay? Every child in our world will know his name. Okay, again, what day is this? It's the day after the murder. It's November 1st. November 1st in the church calendar is All Saints' Day. Okay? That's why Halloween is called Halloween. Een comes from evening. All Hallows Eve, the night before. All Hallows Day, All Saints' Day. Okay? She says, every child in our world will know his name. Dumbledore, exactly. Think about this. You're 11 years old. Or, back up, you're 1 year old. You go off to live with a wizarding family. You're talked about around the clock, as it were. And you grow up being famous. What does that do to your head? Makes it spin. You develop a huge ego. Dumbledore, it would be enough to turn any boy's head. Famous before he can walk and talk? Famous for something you won't remember? No, he'll be better up growing up away from all that. Okay? Hagrid arrives with Harry, flying on Sirius Black's motorbike. Okay? And Dumbledore leaves Harry on the doorstep. And we get chapter 2. It's now 10 years later. Okay? Almost 10 years later. It's not yet Harry's 11th birthday, but it is Dudley's birthday. And we get a description of Harry around page 19. Small and skinny for his age. Looked even smaller and skinnier than he really was. Why? Because he wears Dudley's big clothes, and Dudley's much bigger than he is. Round glasses that are broken, held together with tape. Okay. Hair sticks up in the back. No matter how he cuts it, it always looks the same. Okay. And he's got a scar on his forehead. And whenever he asks about a scar, Aunt Petunia says you got it in the car crash that killed your parents. And don't ask questions. So he's pretty much stopped asking questions. And we find out on Dudley's birthday, the lady that normally babysits Harry can't because she has a broken leg. So Harry has to go off on the birthday trip to the zoo. Okay? While on the trip, a motorcycle goes blazing past them. Uncle Vernon doesn't like it, yells about them. And Harry says, just calmly in the back seat, about page 25, had a dream about a motorcycle. It was flying. Okay? Notice what Vernon says as he almost crashes. Motorcycles don't fly. Okay? Harry says, I had what? A dream. Now, what does everybody know about dreams? They're not real. But Vernon takes what Harry says like it's real. Motorcycles don't fly. Harry, I know. It was only a dream. But notice Vernon's response. Go back to the first paragraph. They don't hold to what? Anything strange or mysterious. Okay? Petunia and Vernon are very repressed people. Obviously. So they go off to the zoo. Harry and the others go to the reptile exhibit. Dudley and his father are standing there at the snake exhibit, banging on the glass, which says don't tap on the glass. Okay. Snake doesn't move, so they go off. Harry stands there, and the snake suddenly opens its beady eyes. Okay, here's a problem in the writing. Any of you know anything about snakes? They don't have eyelids. Snakes can't open their eyes because they're always open. 24 hours a day, as long as they live. Okay? Very slowly, it raises its head and it winks. Again, it can't wink. It doesn't have eyelids. This isn't a magical snake. This is just a boa constrictor. Okay? Snake looks at Harry, jerks its head towards Vernon and Dudley, raises its eyes to the ceiling, meaning it raises its head kind of up to the ceiling, as if to say, I get that all the time. And Harry speaks to it. Yeah, I understand. Must be annoying. Snake nods. Harry asks, where'd he come from? Snake points its tail to the sign, because Harry's not that bright. It says boa constrictor, Brazil. Was it nice there? Points to the sign again, because just beneath there, it reads that the specimen was bred in the zoo. Okay. At which point, Pierce Polkis, the kid who's along with them on the trip, sees Harry, calls for Dudley and Vernon. Dudley comes back, punches Harry in the stomach, and what happens? The glass wall disappears. Okay? And all hell kind of breaks loose. Okay? They go back home, and Harry is sent to his room. Okay? To his cupboard under the stairs. Not last time when I was in London, 2009 I think it was. 2009 when I was teaching my course in London. No, take that back. It was 2013. In 2013, a house went up for sale in the West Country over near Gloucester. And the reason this is important is this is a house J.K. Rowling lived in as a child for about 5 years, if I remember right, in her teenage years. And the house was owned by an American film producer, and it had two key selling points. Other than J.K. Rowling living there, the house had a cupboard under the stairs, pretty much exactly like the one that Harry lives in, is described. Big enough for a bed and pretty much nothing else. Okay? And it also had a trap door down to a cellar or basement. Okay? Much as we will see at the end of this novel. So, letters start arriving, and I'm going to skip a bunch. And Harry's never had a letter before because he doesn't have any other friends. He wants to know who's writing to him. Vernon won't let him see the letters. Finally, it gets so scary how these letters are arriving at the house that they pack up and leave. Just before they leave, what's the final way letters come? Anybody remember? They're rolled up in little scrolls inside each of 24 eggs. Okay, the eggs don't have holes in them. You crack the egg to make eggs, and out comes a letter. What should Vernon realize at that point? What's he trying to do? He's trying to keep Harry from getting involved in this wizarding nonsense, right? But when you get letters wrapped up inside eggs, are you going to be able to stop it? No. So they get in the car, they drive all around, they go to a hotel. Next morning, 100 letters are there for Harry. Mr. H. Potter, room, Coke View, rail, the whole 9 yards. They go off to a hut in the ocean on a rock. Okay? And it's now, man, they're being loud next door. Whoever that is. Hold on. Find the right spot. It's now, come on, turn. Okay, now change, here we go. They go off to the hut, and everybody goes to sleep. Dudley's arms hanging over the side of the couch, and Harry's just watching the clock tick down because the next day is his birthday. And right at 11 o'clock, or excuse me, at midnight, door bursts open and we meet Hagrid. Okay? Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of the keys and grounds at Hogwarts. He gives Harry his letter. Okay? Vernon says, we're going to put a stop to this nonsense. He's not going off to a school run by some crackpot, which makes Hagrid kind of go a little crazy. And he puts a pigtail on Dudley. Okay. And Hagrid discovers he's got to explain to Harry that he's a wizard. He never expected that to happen. So he talks about what happened to Harry and his parents 10 years ago. Shows Harry his letter. And Harry's like, there's got to be a mistake. Okay? And Harry discovers the Dursleys knew all along what he was. And Aunt Petunia snaps. Knew? Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be, my dratted sister being what she was? Oh, she got a letter just like that. Disappeared off to that school. Came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, and she just purges all the stuff that's been held inside. Right? Harry discovers his parents didn't die in a car crash. They died because they were murdered by Lord Voldemort, etc. Right? And I'm going to skip a bunch. So he explains everything, and he takes Harry off the next day to Diagon Alley. Where is Diagon Alley? And what is it? Well, you can only get to it by going through a pub, and the pub is located on Charing Cross Road. But Muggles can't see the pub. They walk down the road, they see a bookseller, and then they see a record store. But in between those two is a pub called the Leaky Cauldron. So Hagrid takes Harry there, introduces him to a few people. They go into Diagon Alley. Look at those words, Diagon Alley. Push them together and say it real fast. And you get diagonally. Okay? So what's the significance or importance of diagonally? Well, if you're looking straight on here, where's diagonally? It's off to the side. Okay? And it's almost as if Rowling is saying, if you look not straight on, but from a slightly different perspective, you will see what Harry sees. You will experience what Harry experiences. In other words, the wizards aren't a totally different breed, a totally different world. No, they're just kind of diagonal to us, like 1 degree off. To use language, from Star Trek and stuff, they're out of phase with the rest of us, as it were. Okay? So, Harry discovers there's a Ministry of Magic. Why do we need a Ministry of Magic? And Hagrid says, why, Harry? We got to keep ourselves hidden from the rest of the people in England. Harry says, why? Why, everyone would be wanting magical solutions to their problems. Nah, we're left best alone. Think about that for a moment. If we were to discover there really were witches and wizards, would we want magical solutions to our problems? Yes. Would we want the national debt to somehow immediately be erased? Yes. Would we want to be able to go up to our bankers that we owe money to and wipe their memories clear? Yes. Okay. we'd be wanting all kinds of problems done away with. Would you want to be able to come into an exam with a magical quill that would have all the right answers? Yes. Just like I'd want a magical pencil or pen that would grade everything for me. Okay?
You wouldn't have to because they would be left.
We'd still have to do it. So, they go off to Gringotts, get money. What does Harry discover at Gringotts? Not only are there goblins, not only are there dragons, but what else? He's loaded. I mean, he opens his vault door. There's a pile of gold there. Okay? They come out of Gringotts, and Hagrid needs a drink. Skipping a bunch. Let's see here. And Hagrid needs a drink, and he sends Harry off to get his robes. About page 76. And here he meets his first other student at Hogwarts. This other student is getting his robes pinned up. "Hello," says the boy. "Hogwarts too?" "Yes. My father's next door buying my books, and mother's up the street looking at wands." He had a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Now, what does this little description tell us about this boy?
He's old.
He's spoiled. Okay. What else? How does he talk about his father? What's he going to do? He's going to bully his father. So is it that he's spoiled?
No, he's just like Dudley.
He's just like Dudley. He's a brat. Okay. The spoiling isn't because they love him so much, necessarily, as much as it is what?
They don't want attention.
What will he do? What do brat children do?
Tantrums.
They throw tantrums. They whine and complain and kick and scream until a poor parent does what? They give in. Okay? And Harry is immediately reminded of Dudley. So they start to talk about Hogwarts. The boy asks Harry a bunch of questions. Harry doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. Okay? Hagrid shows up outside. And Harry says, "I think he's wonderful." When the other boy says, "Oh yeah, he's sort of a savage. Lives in a hut, burns it down every now and then." And the boy asks, "Where are your parents?" "Harry, they're dead." "Oh, sorry, but they were our kind, weren't they?" "Harry, if you mean witch and wizard, yes." Okay. So Harry goes off to Hagrid, and they start to talk. And Hagrid explains a little bit about the schools. Okay. And notice what Hagrid says when he talks about the houses. Because Harry asks, "What is Slytherin and Hufflepuff?" "School houses. There's 4. Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers, but what does he mean by a lot of duffers?" Duffer is a phrase from golf. Okay. You swing and what? You hit the ground. Okay. You don't hit the ball. In other words, Hufflepuffs are a bunch of losers. Notice how Hagrid puts this, though. Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers, but, and Harry interrupts him, "I bet I'm in Hufflepuff." Okay. Hagrid, better Hufflepuff than Slytherin. Now, we're not reading all 7 novels, so I'm going to tell you, if you haven't read them, I'm going to give something away. You get to the end of book 7, and I think it's pretty clear. It's abundantly clear. In Rowling's mind, or at least in the way that she has crafted the novels, Gryffindor is not the best house to be in. Everybody assumes it is. It's Hufflepuff. because of what we hear about Hufflepuff revealed in the Sorting Hat Songs in books 1, 4, and 5. I don't think we have one in 6. Okay? It's made clear Hufflepuff accepts everybody. It's each of the other houses that wants to select only certain individuals. And the Sorting Hat made clear it's this idea of sorting. It's bad. It's not a good thing. Because what does it do? If we were to sort you by simply drawing an x-axis and a y-axis this way, so that we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, what have we just done? We've taken something that's a whole and divided it. And created what? Factions. Okay? That are now against each other. So, Hagrid goes on, talks about Slytherin. Not a single bad wizard, dark wizard, he said, hasn't been in Slytherin, etc. So Harry goes off, and he gets his wand. And we're going to stop pretty soon. Ollivander says, yes, this is around page 82. Thought I'd be seeing you soon, Harry Potter. You have your mother's eyes. You look kind of like your father, but you have your mother's eyes. And he tells Harry what wand his mother had. He tells Harry what wand his father had. Notice his mother's wand, nice wand for charm work. We're going to find out, if you read all 7 novels, Harry's mother was especially adept at charms. Okay? His father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable. And it was really good for transfiguration. Well, what are we going to find out in Book 3? Harry's father, by the time he was a 5th year at school, figured out how to transfigure himself into a stag. Could turn himself, shapeshifter, into a stag. Back and forth. So, he says it's the wand that chooses the wizard. Which is kind of interesting because earlier when we saw Malfoy, Malfoy said his mother was down the street looking at wands. What good would it have done? None. Okay? So he comes up to Harry, looks at him, he says, and that's where, and he touches the scar on his forehead. I don't know about you, but personal space, he just completely violates that. He says, and that's where, and then he tells Harry, and I made the wand that did that. Powerful wand, very powerful. You, with Phoenix Feather. It's going to be important that Voldemort's wand is made of you and has a Phoenix Feather in it. Okay? So, Harry starts trying out wands. Ollivander's measuring him and everything. And he finally finds one. And he waves it. And we see about page 84. Holly and Phoenix Feather. Okay? So Voldemort's is you and Phoenix. Harry's is Holly and Phoenix. Okay? And what does he do? He waves his hand and his fingers feel warm. And he waves it, and a stream of red and gold sparks shoot from the end like a firework. And Ollivander says, yes, bravo, very good. Curious. Harry, what's curious? And he says that this wand is the brother wand to the wand that gave you that scar. The very same Phoenix that gave a feather for his wand gave a feather for yours. Okay? Well, why is this also curious? In book 3, how many of you have read these stories? Has everybody read them or almost? I won't get them. In book 3, Harry learns how to create what's called a Patronus, which is a savior or protector that comes out of his wand that defends him. The Patronus takes the form of a stag. like his father did when his father transformed. Okay? Kind of interesting. Yews are poisonous. The yew tree is poisonous to all the animals in the forest, except for a stag. Stags can eat it. Okay? Holly is an interesting plant. There are holly bushes around Peck Hall, some around Peck Hall, but the holly looks like this. It has a leaf kind of like that, with points. Okay, these are thorns. Okay, and then grows with berries that at winter turn what color? Red. So you have a evergreen bush, because it never loses its leaves, with thorns and red berries. There's a Christmas carol in England. It's a very old Christmas carol, dates from the 1400s, called The Holly and the Ivy. And it's the holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, symbolize Christ. How so? Well, you have thorns here, right? What shape does this kind of take? It's like a crown. A crown of thorns. Okay? It's evergreen, that is, it doesn't die, and it's got red berries. Red berries symbolize the blood. The evergreen symbolizes, could the tomb contain Christ, according to the Christian story? No, because he died and rose again. Which takes us to this. The phoenix was taken throughout the Middle Ages in books called bestiaries. We see this all over the place. Which are books about beasts. Talks about their allegorical representation, what they symbolize, etc. The phoenix was always taken to be allegorical of resurrection in Christ. Because what does the phoenix do? Every 500 years,
It dies.
that's right, it gets on its nest and poof, bursts into flame. Dies down, and then out of the ashes, you hear the, and a little phoenix starts to grow. It starts to caw, and it grows for 500 years, and then poof, it dies again. So it dies and resurrects, dies and resurrects. Okay? And Harry says, towards the end of that chapter, about page 86, everyone thinks I'm special. All those people, Leaky Cauldron, Professor Quirrell, Mr. Ollivander, but I don't know anything about magic. How can they expect great things? I'm famous, I can't even remember why. Because Ollivander said, we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. Nothing like putting a little bit of pressure on a scrawny 11-year-old kid's back. Okay? And Hagrid says, don't worry about it, Harry. You'll be fine. Just be yourself. Okay? In other words, just be yourself means what? What do presidential candidates often try to be? Keep going.
They try to be the opposite of, or what the people want.
Yes, they try to be what they think everybody out there wants. So they go to one group and make a speech, and the speech is all about what this group wants. They go to another group, make another speech. Usually, these are not public speeches. Witness Mitt Romney when he spoke to that group in Miami and talked about the 47% who merely wanted to get what they got from the government, etc. Or witness Obama when he went to that group in San Francisco and talked about the bitter clingers, people who cling to their gods, guns, and religion. Okay? They didn't expect any of that stuff to kind of hit the news, but it did. Were they being themselves? Probably in those private, unscripted, unpublicized meetings? Yes. But when they give public speeches, speeches where there are press and everything, no. That's when they're putting on masks. What does Hagrid tell Harry to do? Don't wear a mask. Be who you are. Okay, we'll stop there.